I'm Mike Marzetta from Mind's Eye. One of my life's goals is to never grow up, never have to grow up. What could be worse? My wife, Christy, and I had kind of two fundamental values that kind of led to Mind's Eye's creation. We wanted to make the difference in lives of kids, and we wanted to have fun doing it. Mind's Eye Robotics is a high-quality, hands-on STEM education experience. We try to give the teacher a nice high-tech set of tools. We teach the teachers how to implement the curriculum in the lab, and 90% of it is them building, programming, formatting, designing, inventing. We want Mind's Eye to be cooler than Xbox. We want the kids to go there and come home from school every day and go, wow, I did the coolest thing today, and not necessarily know that they've learned all this stuff. Kids are very passionate about it. You can see that they're having fun, they're excited, they're energetic, they're in the zone. I hear a lot of it. How do I get my kids to do homework? Well, you make it fun, and they come in before class starts, and they stay late, and they're not thinking of the extra credit. They're thinking, I'm having too much fun, and I can't put this dang project down. It's college level stuff that they're learning. Change and learning are synonymous, and if you don't change, you get left behind. You got new companies emerging using new technologies and have a high demand for high skilled labor. They're good paying jobs. It'd be great to just hire some local folk to fill those. I think that we've got that kind of potential here in Spokane. We're graduating some great kids. When STCU supports learning, they're supporting our future. So many other organizations out there are so bottom line profit focused. I think they lose focus on what's important. I see STCU helping the greater community outside of it to get better, to learn, to grow, and to progress. We're here to do good. We're here to help the greater good. We're very proud to be able to partner with STCU to that end. I think what's a better place to help the greater good than with helping kids? I'm Mike Marzetta, and STCU is here for good.
Spokane listens when business talks. Welcome to Business Talks, the region's only local business talk show with your host, Ryan McNeese. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Now, let's get down to business with Business Talks.
Welcome to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeese, and I'm here in the studio with Larry Larison. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for asking me.
And
Looking forward to it.
We're going to touch a couple different angles today because your background is with Columbia Paint and Coatings and a significant career there, building up that business as well as selling that business, and ultimately taking what you learned from many decades in that business and writing a book. So the book we're going to be talking about today is Build a Better Business, Achieve Continuous Performance Improvement. So we got a lot to talk about.
It's not an easy thing.
It's not an easy thing. Let's go back to the beginning if we can. And how did Columbia Paint and Coatings originally start in the first place?
Sure. Well, my father and three other gentlemen started a company in Montana called American Chemet Corporation.
Where in Montana was that?
In Helena.
It was in Helena, okay.
In 1946, right after World War II, when there was a tremendous shortage of raw materials worldwide because of all the consumption of raw materials in the war. That company was buying product that was being thrown off a American Smelting and Refining smelter in East Helena, Montana. Anaconda Company was still taking tons of copper out of the ground at that point in history. So this little smelter had a zinc oxide product that didn't fit their economies of scale. So my dad and his partners, three of them were metallurgists, contracted to buy the zinc oxide, and by putting it through a little rotary furnace with some flame, could clean it up and make it suitable as a extender pigment in a house paint. So they hired a paint chemist to help posture the zinc oxide to the paint industry. And most paint manufacturers at that point in our history were Midwest or east of the Mississippi. In fact, most industry in the country was still east of the Mississippi. But in an unlikely location, Helena, Montana, population maybe 15,000 then, the state might have had 500,000 or 600,000 people. They started a paint company, called it Columbia, because one of the partners said, you know, if we threw a twig in the Columbia River at the top of the Continental Divide, it would float toward the largest population centers around us, so they thought it might grow in that direction.
Let's call it Columbia Paint.
So it got the name Columbia Paint and Coatings, which was a great name because there's so many Columbias out here.
Right.
Nobody thought it was a small company. With the name Columbia, everybody thought they must be big, they must be good.
That's an interesting psychology. I agree with
Wasn't
you.
a bad start.
There are names that seem small. Columbia does not
Yeah,
represent
most
that.
regional paint companies, and a lot of them started about that point in time in the U.S., were named after the founders.
Right, right.
So the company started that way because we were in a sparsely populated area from a geography standpoint. The only way to really grow was physical expansion into more geography. So long story short, when we sold the business in 1970, right before the economic downturn, which was providential,
Right.
we had 41 stores in 8 states, Mountain West, Pacific Northwest, and Alaska. And we went to market the same way the Sherwin-Williams Company does, which is the biggest paint company in the U.S. And they're vertically integrated. So they buy raw materials, they formulate their products, they manufacture them, and they sell a large percentage. We sold over 95% of what we sold through our own branch stores.
Okay.
So when the company was started, typical...
And that is unique because I'd imagine we can talk about the supply chains of a Home Depot, et cetera, and how those products are sold.
Yeah, it's not...
You guys are selling through your own stores, though.
Right.
95%.
And when my dad and his partners decided to do it that way, it was kind of a departure from what was the norm at that time. The norm at that time was there were paint manufacturers, and they sold to distributors, and they sold to dealers, and the dealers sold to you and me to paint our house.
Okay. A lot of different folks in the chain.
But today, the most successful, most profitable paint companies in the U.S. are a handful of regionals, like Columbia was, that are left, and the big companies like Valspar and Sherwin-Williams, PPG Industries, and Benjamin Moore that sell primarily through their own distribution systems.
Okay. So all of these years of being in this business, clearly it gave you lots of time to think about how one would take principles that you've found that worked, didn't work. And obviously, we learn a lot from what didn't work, too. What was kind of that moment where you thought, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to try to give back, I'm going to try to encapsulate maybe my thinking here?
Well, the book probably didn't really come until about the time or shortly after we sold the business.
Okay. And what remind me that year? That was
1970.
Okay.
I mean, not 1970, I'm sorry. 2007.
2007.
2007,
Okay.
the business was sold.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'm 7 years old when the company starts.
Okay.
So it's around me my whole life.
Okay.
And I worked my way through college in a Columbia paint store. Had some other opportunities, but I liked the business. Was offered a good job, so in 1965 I went to work for them full time. And in 1976, after doing a lot of different jobs in sales and marketing, advertising, sales promotion, public relations,
Right.
Had a chance to become president and did. So I was president from 1976 till we sold it in 2007.
In 2007. And obviously you grew up in Helena. Where did you say you went to college?
Grew up in Helena, went to college at the University of Montana at Missoula
Okay.
for 3 years, and then transferred back to a little Catholic college in Helena called Carroll.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's a great
graduated
school.
there.
Yeah, great. Both are good schools.
Because of business logistics, in 1970 we bought a small industrial coatings company in Spokane, and decided 4 years later, Spokane would be a much better place for us to be headquartered because of transportation in and out
Little
for our sales
more central.
executives and raw material
Yeah.
people that we need to communicate with to be effective in manufacturing product.
Yeah.
So headquartered here since 1974.
Well, it certainly makes sense, like you said, from a logistics standpoint.
Yeah, and when I joined the company, it wasn't very sophisticated. Not a lot of great books on how to run a business had been written.
Yeah.
There was nothing around like EPA or OSHA, so the regulatory
Different
environment
world.
was
Literally a different world.
not very onerous. I had a chance to work with a management team that evolved a management system over the 31 years that I ran the company. We didn't write it down to the point of detail that you'll see in the book, or if you looked at my website, which is LarisonAssociates.com.
Okay, perfect.
When we decided to sell the business, I knew I didn't want to not work, and I thought it would be a good idea to consider starting a management consulting company. So I sat down and tried to memorialize the key points that I thought it was that had made Columbia an exceptional small to medium-sized company.
Mm-hmm.
When we sold it, we had 41 stores, 350 employees. Not very big, but big enough to be complex enough to have some depth.
That's pretty big.
So created 10 points of focus, which are kind of operating principles that I think any good business can benefit by adhering to and utilizing, and 10 protocols, which are basically how to operate the business day in, year out, year in, year out.
Were there some, before I jump back, because I do want to talk about some of those protocols actually, and some of the, I think, building blocks that make up the book. What were some of the maybe relational or conversations that you had maybe with your dad when you took the business from maybe some of its original ideas, if you will, to ideas that were going to expand it to a fairly large size? Because as you said, 350 employees later,
Right.
multiple locations, 41 locations.
41 locations.
Yeah. So what were some of those early conversations where that business did not look like the business it once was in Helena, Montana?
I don't recall a lot of specific early conversations with my dad or his partners, and I worked pretty closely with all of them. I think when I came on board and became part of the management team, the company was very unsophisticated. The people in the field didn't think. The home office communicated with them very well. The sales department didn't talk a lot to the R&D department, but the sales department depended on the R&D department for all the quality and performance aspects of the products that they make. So I'd say the first thing I realized was that we needed to have the silos, as they call them in large corporations, the different departments, communicate effectively with each other on a regular basis. So there wasn't a lot of there was a lot of interdepartmental conversation, but there wasn't a lot of intra-departmental. In other words, departments that had to work together and succeed together weren't communicating that well, and they didn't always feel that warm and fuzzy about each other. So
all on the same team, but not working together necessarily.
Right. I think one of the first things I did that made a big difference, short and long term, was creating a series of meetings in which all the departments that interface on a regular basis sat down, talked about issues, discussed problems, decided on projects to move forward on, and then set up an exhaustive review process so that every month or every quarter, depending on how frequently the meetings were held, we'd start every meeting with a review of the minutes of the previous meeting and the projects that we're committed to and the progress that had been made on them. So we weren't missing much, so stuff wasn't falling through the cracks.
Yeah, there was overlap.
Right.
Yeah.
We hadn't had budgets in place, formal budgets in place. When I became,
Who needs budgets,
when I became a vice president. And we do need budgets in place.
Right.
We didn't have the standard SWOT exercise where you look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we started doing that on a regular basis. And that evolved us into a pretty sophisticated, for a small company, method of strategic planning. So we had clear set goals, strategies, and tactics every year, and we tried to manage from the bottom up, as we called it, as much as we could, and involve every employee in the company in generating ideas and goals and strategies and tactics to achieve those goals. So every year we'd come up with a plan and review it on a regular basis, executive staff on a monthly basis, lower level management staff at least on a quarterly basis. But everybody was inputting it, everybody was bought into it, and then we created incentive programs in which if the goals were achieved, everyone was rewarded.
Makes sense.
And the more people you get worried about the bottom line, the less you have to worry about the bottom line as a leader.
That's right.
And learned that, I'd say, early on.
Takes care of itself to a certain degree. Larry, let's come right back after a short break and jump into some of the protocols over the years that are embedded in this book. We'll take a short little break. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
The economy is getting stronger. Banks are lending again, and interest rates are at historic lows. Now is a great time to buy your dream home. The caring and knowledgeable professionals at Homes for You have been helping people just like you for over 20 years. They take the time to listen to what you want and will help you find just the right home in Washington or Idaho. Real estate is what we do at Homes for You, 928-5782, or visit online at homes4uspokane.com.
Welcome back to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeese, and we're here with Larry Larison at Columbia Paint and Coatings, talking about the background and history of Columbia, starting in Helena, Montana, sold in 2007. Let's talk a little bit more about when Columbia sold in 2007. Per the statistical fundamentals of Columbia, it sold for more than any other company of its type. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as near as we can tell, and we were very active in industry associations and tracked what was going on in the paint and coatings industry pretty thoroughly. We sold for the highest multiples that any company of our type had sold for. So ours was what would be called a stores company, because our business was our sales were primarily through company-owned stores.
Right, the 41 stores.
Right. We were purchased by the Sherwin-Williams Company, who at the time probably had 4,500 stores.
Jeez.
But we went to business and went to market essentially the same way they did. And probably in the case of 80% of the markets that we were in at the time we sold, they were in as well. So we were bought out by a large competitor.
Right.
And I knew from 5 years before we sold the business that they were the likely acquirer, because we paid a lot of attention to what was going on in the industry all around the U.S.
Right, and a lot of parallels to the geographic locations you were selling.
I had a lot of industry friends through industry associations that we belonged to who had sold to Sherwin-Williams. So they were a logical acquirer. And the company was operated in somewhat of a unique way. Columbia never had a majority shareholding family. There were 4 families involved in the business. And when the shareholders started the company, they realized that they weren't going to be, a one-man show or a one-family show. So they structured the business much more like a public corporation. So the shareholders elected a board of directors every year. The board of directors elected officers every year, like a public company does.
Yeah, and I'm actually fascinated by that, because I think in the origin of it structurally, I think you're making a substantial point. That's not necessarily how a private company is run.
No, most family-owned businesses run with the family in the chair all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, so my management group and I were elected by the directors every year, and our charge was to profitably grow the business while maintaining financial strength. So our performance benchmark was the S&P 500 or better.
Yep.
And unlike most small companies who don't pay any dividend at all, they take all the money and
disperse
individually
it
pay the tax man, but not corporately. We ran for a high profit and a high dividend level, and we paid 50% of our after-tax profits out to the shareholders every year, and kept exhaustive professional records by CPA firms that were signing off the audit every year. So when we took the business out for sale, we showed a set of books that a lot of large companies don't see from small companies.
You couldn't see that precision in some of these other companies. So I'm sure Sherwin felt that was extremely unique.
They did, and they let us know quite a few years in advance of the sale that they were very interested. So we
I wondered. I was going to ask.
Cordial dialogue with them a long time before it ever happened.
That's okay.
My bad.
Actually, that defines why you're successful in business. The phone keeps ringing. So what do you think, I think you said 5 years out from when you ultimately were taken out, if you will, and the sale occurred with Sherwin, 5 years out you knew they were probably a likely candidate, or probably the best candidate, if you will, for that. What do you think, beyond the probably meticulous record keeping and financial and accounting audits, what do you think Sherwin saw? And again, this is part and parcel to the book, which is Build a Better Business. What were they seeing? What were the elements, the fundamental elements of Columbia that you think really made you a likely candidate for them?
Well, we had an excellent customer base.
And they knew you were taking their customers.
They did. And they saw an opportunity to substantially increase market share in all the markets we were in that they were in. And in many of those markets, it was just us and them as company-owned as manufacturer-owned paint stores. So probably an opportunity until another regional company or national company came in on top of them to increase their margins in those markets as well. And they were a very large company. When we sold the business, we were $75 million a year in sales. They were $7 billion. They've since grown to about $14 billion.
Really, doubled.
They just acquired Valspar.
Oh, that's right. I remember reading that.
So they're huge. They know what they're doing. They're a very good company, very integritous, and they knew that we operated with essentially the same principles they did. There were some synergies to be had because Longpole, they weren't going to maintain our manufacturing plants. They were too small for their economies of scale. So they reduced some substantial overhead.
So
when they
your
acquired the business.
manufacturing facilities, they did not end up acquiring?
They operated them for about 3 years.
Okay.
And then they actually gave the shareholders of Columbia Paint that real estate back, and we took it out and sold it to the
Interesting.
market.
That's interesting. So they did acquire it originally.
They did.
That's kind of an interesting concept, though, in terms of the scalability of those sites.
I think they also saw a tremendous opportunity to pick up some great employees in our store system because we had good incentive programs, we had good training programs. We did a good job keeping every job filled with the right person.
But that's saying something. When you talked about you had the right training programs, a lot of times a business of that size, of Sherwin's size, will come in and they say, hey, we want the assets, et cetera, whether it be infrastructure, buildings, et cetera, but they oftentimes don't want the people, which is a problem with some of these acquisitions. I'd say that's a testament to your training regimen, that they said, we want the people. They're the right people that make this culture.
Yeah, I would hazard a guess that all of our sales personnel that were on board when Sherwin-Williams made the acquisition stayed on board, and some of them moved into some significant management positions.
Well, I think that's saying a lot. Let's speak to some of the protocols that stick out to you in the book. Give us an idea of some of those real benchmark fundamentals that you think drives a successful business.
So go through the points of focus, perhaps?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, well, our points of focus are fairly simple. The first one was to maintain a passionate commitment to maintain a passionate commitment to profitably grow the business while maintaining a strong balance sheet. Too many small businesses get obsessed with growth and realize you got to have cash in the bank to finance the growth and outgrow themselves. So that was a charge from day one with our shareholders, and we did that and did it well.
So in essence, a balance where I understand what you're saying, that some folks, if you're looking down that road, we are going to grow at all costs, but you're too lean, you don't have any cash reserves, versus more balanced growth.
One thing I contend in the foreword to the book and in all of the consulting literature is that the fundamentals that we ran on are the same fundamentals that most good companies around the world run on, because they're common sense. If a really good businessman or a business professor reads this book or looks at the website, he'll say, yeah, that all makes sense, but it's amazing how many companies don't apply it diligently on a regular basis.
Like you're saying, it should be the common denominator, but isn't necessarily in all businesses.
Yeah, so the book was designed to be useful to a student in business school, to a banker who's trying to help a commercial lending customer run their business better, to somebody who's running a business that wants to run it better and isn't maybe doing all these things diligently and the right way.
Well, and understand the fundamentals of business. Oftentimes, when you're talking about whether it's a business school individual or somebody starting out in banking or otherwise, as you're suggesting, sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And so I think what you're definitely making a good point of is here are the fundamentals that need to be considered and managed properly.
Yeah, I think we focus on how important it is to be ethical in business, so treat all individuals and organizations you deal with in a fair, honest, and ethical manner. Recognize that each employee is a team member and maintain a strong commitment to team building and team member education. That really solidifies the team and makes people want to stay with you. Identify the vital few areas of focus for the organization that represent the greatest opportunity for profit improvement. Some people lose sight of that and focus on margin. The more margin you make, the more you can grow the business. Get the right person in every position. leverage each team member's strengths, make changes when called for. Sometimes performance falls off, and changes have to be made.
But making those tough decisions.
It is.
And I think the standard is waiting too long to make that critical decision.
Frequently.
Yep.
So
I think you see that across all different types of businesses.
then you have to continuously improve your product offerings so you're the supplier of choice for an expanding customer base. You can't have an expanding customer base if you don't do that. Implement a thorough, accurate reporting and performance to goals review systems. And I think in real estate, people say location are the most important things. I think in business, follow up, and follow up.
I would agree
are
with
the
that.
most important things. Keep looking at what you're doing and always try to do it better. That's where the continuous performance improvement comes from. Maintain a commitment to develop products, programs, and initiatives that are designed to maintain and enhance a healthy environment in all the communities and countries in which you operate. It's a no-brainer, but not everybody does it. And if you don't, it'll backfire.
Well, and I think you make a good point. There's a lot of principles that you could read through that think, as you said earlier, well, that makes sense. But to actually implement, that's the tough part.
Yep. And, here we are, a highly regulated culture, but you've got to maintain a commitment to comply with all laws and regulations in all the communities and countries in which you operate.
Well, and I think someone the size Columbia was, and certainly Sherwin's size, that compliance in so many geographic regions and countries would be just a huge task. But you got to do it if you're going to play on that field.
Yeah, I don't remember at which point we decided, okay, even at our size, we've got to have a vice president in charge of environmental and regulation.
Yep.
And we did.
Basically a compliance officer.
Yep.
Yep.
And he made a huge difference.
Yep. Well, we're unfortunately out of time, but I do want to make sure we let our listeners know the best locations to find the book. It is on Amazon, right?
On Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Okay, so Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Build a Better Business, Achieve Continuous Performance Improvement, and it is with Larry Larison. And I didn't ask you from the beginning, Hoyt is actually your
Real name.
birth name. What's the middle name?
H?
Yes.
Humphreys.
Humphreys.
Yeah,
So
Larry's a nickname off the last name.
Okay, well, I like it. Everybody needs to go check out the book, the principles, protocols in this book, Build a Better Business. Thank you, Larry, for being here.
Could I point out one more thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're basically recommending certain things that a business can do to improve its operations. And in the book, we took the approach that if we recommend a practice or a protocol to you, we don't just recommend it and say do it. We have a why, explain why you should do it that way, and then we have some hows, so explaining how to implement.
I think that's the
And some of
important
those
piece.
are actual experiences from my operating Columbia Paint and Coatings, things we actually did in place that made it work and made it much more successful on average.
Well, and I think that's so important, though, because as we've both been commenting today, there's the do this, but why should I do it? And how do I actually do it?
There's a why and how for everything.
They'll figure it out in this book. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you very much. I
Appreciate
appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
Business Talks is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Business Talks wishes you good business and a good day.
I'm Mike Marzetta from Mind's Eye. One of my life's goals is to never grow up, never have to grow up. What could be worse? My wife, Christy, and I had kind of two fundamental values that kind of led to Mind's Eye's creation. We wanted to make the difference in the lives of kids, and we wanted to have fun doing it. Mind's Eye Robotics is a high-quality, hands-on STEM education experience. We try to give the teacher a nice high-tech set of tools. We teach the teachers how to implement the curriculum in the lab, and 90% of it is them building, programming, formatting, designing, inventing. We want Mind's Eye to be cooler than Xbox. We want the kids to go there and come home from school every day and go, wow, I did the coolest thing today, and not necessarily know that they've learned all this stuff. Kids are very passionate about it. You can see that they're having fun, they're excited, they're energetic, they're in the zone. I hear a lot of it. How do I get my kids to do homework? Well, you make it fun, and they come in before class starts, and they stay late, and they're not thinking the extra credit. They're thinking I'm having too much fun, and I can't put this dang project down. It's college level stuff that they're learning. Change and learning are synonymous, and if you don't change, you get left behind. You got new companies emerging using new technologies and have a high demand for high skilled labor. They're good paying jobs. It'd be great to just hire some local folk to fill those. I think that we've got that kind of potential here in Spokane. We're graduating some great kids. When STCU supports learning, they're supporting our future. So many other organizations out there are so bottom line profit focused. I think they lose focus on what's important. I see STCU helping the greater community outside of it to get better, to learn, to grow, and to progress. We're here to do good. We're here to help the greater good. We're very proud to be able to partner with STCU to that end. I think what is a better place to help the greater good than with helping kids? I'm Mike Marzetta, and STCU is here for good.